The coffee still lingered with its rich aroma when Rachel Donovan clocked out at the small café near Monument Circle in downtown Indianapolis on an April night in 2005. The city was still damp from a prolonged drizzle, the streets glistening under the faint yellow glow of streetlights. At 1:07 a.m., security footage captured Rachel, 27, wearing an old denim jacket and clutching a small purse as she stepped out of the café's door. She turned into a narrow street leading to the parking lot, her petite figure gradually fading into the quiet night. A taxi driver parked nearby noticed a dark sedan idling silently, its headlights cutting through the rain. And within less than an hour, Rachel's mysterious disappearance would haunt Indianapolis for nearly 2 decades. Before diving into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to stay updated on the latest cases. Indianapolis, an April night in 2005, a fine drizzle blanketed the wet asphalt streets, the yellow streetlights casting trembling reflections on the slick pavement. Downtown near Monument Circle had settled into silence. Office buildings stood dark, with only the sound of the wind swirling and the occasional crunch of shoes from late-night passers-by. At the corner, the small cafe where Rachel Donovan worked the night shift still glowed with light as she cleaned up the counter, folded her coffee and milk-stained apron, and said goodbye to her co-workers. Rachel, 27, petite, was wearing a worn denim jacket, dark pants, and a small crossbody purse that day. A familiar face at the cafe, she often worked late shifts that stretched past midnight, leaving when the city was nearly asleep. At 1:07 a.m., the security camera above the cafe door recorded Rachel stepping outside, one hand gripping her purse strap, the other zipping her jacket against the damp, chilly breeze. She turned into the narrow street toward the parking lot, her steps quickening under the drizzle that blurred the distant lights. That was the last recorded image of Rachel Donovan. After that moment, she vanished into the night, as if she had never existed. Rachel's phone never rang again, nor did she send a single message. As the sun rose, desperate attempts to reach her from her family, call after call, were met with hollow silence. Her mother, anxious, called the cafe and learned Rachel had clocked out on time and left as usual. Her sister rushed to Rachel's apartment, finding the door locked, lights off, and the bed untouched, as if it hadn't been used. These signs coalesced into a stark fear. Rachel had vanished on her way home, in a bustling city that felt cold and empty at night. After hours of trying to call, reaching out to friends and coworkers, the family had no choice but to contact the police. In that moment, Indianapolis officially witnessed the beginning of a mysterious disappearance, leaving a horrific void that no one in the Donovan family could have anticipated. When the emergency call came into the Marion County Sheriff's Office that morning, Rachel Donovan's file was quickly labeled missing person, high risk. A young woman, vanishing after a night shift, unreachable, with belongings left behind. All of this led the duty officer to immediately conclude this wasn't a typical runaway case. Lieutenant Robert Klein, head of the Missing Persons Unit, was the first to be notified. He had seen cases of people gone overnight, back by morning, but with Rachel, his professional instinct told him something was very different. Patrol teams were dispatched that morning, focusing on the familiar route. Rachel walked from the cafe to her apartment, north of Monument Circle. Officers scoured every street corner, alley, and the parking lot where regulars parked after hours. Less than an hour later, an officer froze when he spotted a dark object near the curb, beside a public trash can, about 3 blocks from the cafe. Picking it up, they realized it was a black women's purse, its strap soaked with rainwater. The identification inside quickly confirmed it was Rachel's. What stunned everyone was that most of her belongings were still there: wallet, bank cards, a tube of lipstick, some personal papers. The only thing missing was her cell phone, the item Rachel rarely let go of. Forensic technicians were called to the scene immediately. They spread a sealing tarp and carefully placed the purse in a clear nylon bag. During a preliminary check, a flashlight beam on the strap revealed a dark stain. A quick test confirmed it was dried blood. A small trace, possibly from a scratch, but in this context, it was a glaring red flag, suggesting a struggle had occurred. Around the purse's location, the night's rain had washed away much, but on a patch of wet concrete, a crime scene technician noticed an unusual indentation. Using fluorescent powder, they identified a faint shoe print on the ground. The print was large enough to confirm it wasn't from a woman's shoe. Its size and shape suggested it likely belonged to an adult male. The print was quickly photographed from multiple angles and measured for the report. Lieutenant Klein, standing in the drizzle looking at the sealed purse, knew the investigation had crossed a threshold. If Rachel had simply left, her purse wouldn't be abandoned on the street, bearing a bloodstain. If it was a robbery, the wallet and cards wouldn't still be there. The only truth he could confirm was this: someone had intervened, and Rachel may have been harmed on this short stretch of road. He ordered the area cordoned off, yellow tape stretched to keep curious onlookers at bay, and a mobile command post set up at the nearest intersection. The entire street was swept again for any related debris. A few small items, a wet piece of fabric, a cigarette butt were collected for later analysis. Meanwhile, a map of the area was spread across a patrol car hood, red dots marking the café, Rachel's usual route, and the spot where the purse was found. The gaps between those dots were where the perpetrator might have struck. As afternoon fell, the preliminary report was sent to headquarters. Clear signs of foul play. The incident does not appear voluntary. A short line, but heavy with implication from that moment. Rachel Donovan's case was no longer a simple missing person report, but an official criminal investigation, with a crime scene, evidence, and a small bloodstain marking the start of an unresolved mystery. In that tense atmosphere, the police knew the next steps couldn't stop at the crime scene evidence. They needed witnesses, fragments from eyes that might have glimpsed something in the rainy night. So, that afternoon, with the yellow tape still stretched across the street where the purse was found, the investigative team decided to broaden their search for information from the community. They split into small groups, knocking on doors of apartments and shops around Monument Circle, asking anyone who was awake around 1 a.m. Among dozens of vague responses, one witness stood out with a specific detail. Carl Hughes, a 42-year-old taxi driver, said he was parked near the café waiting for fares when Rachel left her shift. Hughes vividly recalled the night's atmosphere: drizzling rain, deserted streets, and what caught his attention was a dark sedan, possibly black or dark blue, parked across from the café. Its headlights were on, engine idling steadily for minutes, but no one got in or out. Hughes described it as unsettling and gave me chills, as no one would sit idly in a car during a rainy night without reason. However, when he got a fare and drove off, he didn't return. And only later, when he read about Rachel, did that memory unsettle him. The police recorded his full statement, noting the sedan's generic design but no license plate or distinct features. Meanwhile, another team collected surveillance footage from the area. They reviewed dozens of tapes from convenience stores, ATMs, and parking lots. Among them, one clip from an ATM camera at the street corner became a focal point. Timestamp: 1:05 a.m. Just minutes before Rachel appeared on the café's camera. The footage was blurry from the rain, but it clearly showed a tall man in dark clothing leaning against a wall near the ATM. He didn't make a transaction or move much, only occasionally raising a hand to take a drag from a cigarette. The ember flickering in the dark, the narrow angle obscured his face, but his large build and waiting posture stood out from a random passerby. Notably, right when Rachel left the café, this man vanished from the frame. Investigators marked the clip as potential suspect, though they had to admit the footage was too blurry for a direct identification. Beyond Hughes and the ATM camera, another piece was added from a residential area a few blocks away. Margaret Lewis, a 67-year-old woman living alone on the second floor, said she was woken around 1:20 a.m. by an unusual noise. According to her, it wasn't thunder or an engine, but clearly the loud slam of a car door echoing in the quiet night. Her cautious nature made her listen for a few minutes, but fear kept her from peeking out the window. No further sounds followed. When she heard about Rachel, the memory of that slam resurfaced, prompting her to contact the police. All details were logged that day: the dark sedan idling without moving, a tall man smoking by the ATM, and the loud car door slam at the time Rachel vanished. Together, these painted a chilling scenario. Rachel may have been forced into a car during the rainy night. Yet, as investigator Klein noted in his report, the pieces were still too fragmented. The sedan had no identifiable plate, the man in the footage had no visible face, and the car door slam, while timed correctly, was only circumstantial. They were merely indicators, hints, not enough to charge or pinpoint a specific suspect. Still, for the investigative team, these signs were a foundation to build on. They confirmed Rachel didn't leave willingly. She vanished under circumstances involving a suspicious vehicle and an unidentified man. Those small details, from a taxi driver's story to a noise that kept an elderly woman awake, became faint glimmers in the dark. As the first day's work ended, Klein closed the thick case file, adding a brief but chilling note. The pieces don't yet connect, but the scent of an abduction is clear in the air. From that realization, the file of scattered clues, the dark sedan, the tall man smoking, the loud car door slam, quickly turned into a concrete investigative plan. To start, the Marion County Police returned to the basics, identifying those close to or regularly in contact with Rachel Donovan in the weeks before her disappearance. A list was quickly compiled: Rachel's ex-boyfriend, her co-workers at the café, and some regular customers known to chat with her. Names filled pages in the report, prioritized for questioning. The first called in was Mark Jensen, Rachel's ex-boyfriend. They had broken up over 6 months prior, but the family worried he might be involved, as Rachel had mentioned his occasional jealousy. In the interrogation room, Mark calmly answered each question. He stated that on the night Rachel vanished, he was working a night shift at a warehouse on the outskirts of Indianapolis, with security cameras and an electronic time clock. When police verified, everything checked out. Jensen was at the warehouse from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., with over 10 co-workers confirming his presence. Within a day, police crossed his name off the suspect list. The cafe co-workers were next. 2 who worked the same shift said Rachel finished on time, acting normal, with no signs of conflict. One female co-worker noted Rachel was cautious, always calling her mother after shifts, making her silence even more unusual. The co-workers were confirmed to be at their homes after the shift, none matching the suspicious time frame. They were cleared, but their information helped paint a clearer picture. Rachel left the cafe in a stable mood, not anxious or arguing, meaning her disappearance was entirely unexpected. With the ex-boyfriend and co-workers cleared, police turned to the third group, regular customers. Cafe records highlighted a group of young immigrant men who frequented the place. They often gathered in the evenings, talking loudly and occasionally being reprimanded by staff. Some patrons had complained about their inappropriate comments toward female employees, including Rachel. Police saw this as a lead worth pursuing, especially since witness Hughes mentioned a dark sedan, a common vehicle among immigrant communities working in local garages. During interrogations, the group initially cooperated, but deeper questioning revealed inconsistencies. 2 claimed they left the cafe at 11 p.m., while another said they stayed until nearly midnight. 1, a young man named Khalid, grew nervous when asked about 1 a.m., the time Rachel vanished. However, cross-checks found no direct links, no DNA on Rachel's purse, no cameras showing their car near the scene. The inconsistencies led to a few days of further questioning, but all were eventually released. The final report from this phase reflected the frustration. Individuals connected to the victim were questioned, no incriminating evidence found. The immigrant group showed suspicious behavior, but lacked concrete proof. The team had to accept that, despite thoroughly vetting 3 circles of people close to Rachel, they couldn't form a cohesive picture. This didn't mean the investigation stopped. For Lieutenant Klein, this step was necessary to rule out easy leads, before tackling tougher ones. But he couldn't deny the disappointment. After days of questioning, the only results were fragmented statements and suspicions without proof. The Rachel Donovan case continued to expand, branching into new directions, but lacked a clear linchpin to tie it all together. Klein's end-of-day notes revealed a heavy mood. "We've covered the outer circle, boyfriend, coworkers, regulars, but no one stands out. The question lingers, who do the dark sedan and the tall man by the ATM belong to?" After the immigrant group was investigated but lacked sufficient evidence, the Rachel Donovan case shifted to a new direction. Instead of broadening the search for new clues, Marion County Police focused increasingly on a familiar spot just a few streets from the café. A hookah lounge notorious as a lively hangout for young foreign men. Reports from patrons and nearby staff indicated the questioned group frequently visited, drinking and smoking shisha late into the night. This coincidence quickly made the hookah lounge a focal point of suspicion for investigators. A surveillance team was dispatched for nightly observation. From a covert van, they recorded every person entering and leaving, compiling a list of regulars and cross-referencing with existing statements. Every car leaving the lot had its license plate logged and checked against DMV records. Over weeks, hundreds of hours of footage were archived, forming a thick case file. Public pressure also pushed police to show they were doing something. Local media began speculating that Rachel's disappearance might be linked to illegal activity within the immigrant community. The turning point came with a raid in early summer. At midnight, police stormed the hookah lounge, searching from the shisha coal basement to a cluttered break room with scattered sofas. They seized numerous items: glasses with fingerprints, cigarette butts, stained tablecloths. All were sent to the lab, hoping to find Rachel's DNA or related blood traces. But when results came back, they led nowhere. No DNA matched the purse samples, no blood traces were unusual. During tense interrogations, the group was detained multiple times. Some grew frustrated, even angry at being repeatedly targeted. One bluntly said, "We just go there to smoke shisha and listen to music. Why do the police keep thinking we're criminals?" Though their answers didn't fully convince investigators, the law didn't allow holding them without solid evidence. One by one, they were released, leaving behind exhaustion and suspicion. Internally, many younger officers began doubting this direction. They argued that objective evidence, DNA, physical items, cameras, didn't point to the hookah lounge. But with no clearer leads, the case kept circling back to this spot. 3 months passed, draining vast resources, hundreds of surveillance hours, dozens of reports, countless conflicting statements, all for an empty outcome. Lieutenant Klein, in a report to his superiors, admitted his frustration. "We focused too heavily on the hookah lounge, but so far we have nothing but assumptions. DNA evidence refutes the hypothesis, yet we haven't found another path." That line marked the moment the investigation began to lose its way. The obsession with the dark sedan and the man in the ATM footage was overshadowed by weeks of fruitless surveillance at the hookah lounge. For the Donovan family, this delay was even more painful. They followed the news, watching police repeatedly question immigrants only to release them, while no real progress was announced. The faint hope of finding Rachel was increasingly replaced by doubt. Had the police been on the wrong track from the start? By the time fall arrived, the hookah lounge investigation was officially closed. No physical evidence, no DNA, no confessions, only stacks of files stamped with red ink, inconclusive. At that point, the Rachel Donovan case, just months earlier, a top priority, began to grow cold. The final report from this phase stated clearly, "We wasted significant resources on a fruitless investigative direction. The case has reached a dead end." That also became the hallmark of files, later dubbed with a haunting term, cold case. By the end of 2006, after nearly 20 months of circling through dead-end theories, the investigation into Rachel Donovan's disappearance officially stalled. Questioning the immigrant group, monitoring the hookah lounge, cross-checking alibis of friends and coworkers, all led nowhere. No matching DNA, no direct witnesses, no new physical evidence. At the Marion County Sheriff's Office, when the open case board was updated at year's end, Rachel Donovan's name was struck from the priority list and moved to a colder category, cold case, missing person. Administrative procedures began. All evidence from the scene, Rachel's abandoned purse, the small piece of fabric on its strap, the dried blood sample, miscellaneous items like cigarette butts and scraps of cloth, found within a few hundred meters, was resealed. The Marion County Evidence Storage, a row of metal warehouses near the city's southern industrial area, received the cardboard boxes labeled Case Hash 2005-1478, Donovan Rachel, missing person. The boxes were neatly stacked on high shelves, alongside hundreds of other dormant cases from years past. In the atmosphere of old paper, tape, and metal, Rachel Donovan's case became a name resting silently in the dark, mentioned only when someone flipped through the files. In the final report to his superiors, Lieutenant Robert Klein wrote a brief but chilling line: "The victim is likely deceased. Body not yet found." The words were chosen carefully, balancing objectivity with the despair of those directly involved. They knew that with time stretching on without contact, financial activity, or phone signals, the chances of the victim's survival were near zero. But declaring Rachel dead required a body or clearer evidence, something they didn't have. Within the investigative team, a sense of helplessness weighed heavily. Some younger officers, who had spent weeks monitoring the hookah lounge, expressed frustration that their efforts only earned a cold case stamp. To them, Rachel wasn't just a name but a face on the meeting room wall, a haunting reminder of a woman who vanished in a bustling city with no one noticing. But for the system, closing the file was inevitable. Budget, manpower, and public pressure forced police to shift focus to new cases. The Donovan family also felt the shift. Initially, they received regular updates from the police and saw their daughter's image on local news. But by late 2006, the calls grew brief, repeating the same refrain: no new developments. When they learned the case was officially archived, Rachel's mother sat silently for hours in her apartment, staring at a phone that no longer rang. She understood that from now on, finding her daughter would rely on the family clinging to hope, not on the investigation. In Marion County's cold storage, Rachel Donovan's evidence sat alongside other missing persons cases: women who vanished driving on highways, young men who left bars and never returned. Each box held an unfinished story, and Rachel's was just one of them. For investigator Klein, this was a scar on his career. He had once believed he'd find answers, but time and lack of evidence forced him to step back. His final note, stored with the file, read: the case likely involves abduction by vehicle. Homicide not ruled out. Recommendation: preserve all evidence, await new forensic technology. As 2006 closed, Rachel Donovan's case officially froze. The city moved on, new crime stories emerged, and Rachel's name faded from headlines. But in the shadows of Marion County's storage, the dried blood and rain-soaked purse remained, silent witnesses waiting for the day they'd be reawakened. They hadn't lost value, only the era lacked the tools to hear their story. That silence marked a temporary halt. It opened a nearly two-decade void until later, when DNA technology advanced dramatically, those seemingly meaningless pieces of evidence would become the key to turning back the wheel of justice. But in late 2006, it was just a cold case, closed with red ink and the quiet pain of the Donovan family. In 2015, exactly 10 years after Rachel Donovan vanished on that rainy night, in downtown Indianapolis, her file was pulled from Marion County's cold storage. A small press conference was held at the sheriff's office, in a cramped room with rows of white plastic chairs, a wooden podium, and a banner reading "Cold Case Awareness." Lieutenant Robert Klein, now gray-haired, stood before the cameras and repeated almost verbatim what he'd said years before. "We urge anyone with information about the night of April 23, 2005, to come forward. Even the smallest detail could make a difference." Behind him, on a board, was an enlarged photo of Rachel, A 27-year-old, with a gentle smile and bright eyes, now an iconic face of an unsolved disappearance. Local media covered the story, and a few TV stations aired the image during evening news. The Donovan family, sitting quietly in their living room, felt both pain and familiarity with this cycle. Hope briefly reignited, only to be extinguished by the reality of no new leads. 10 years had passed, with no new witnesses or evidence emerging. The appeals through media and freshly printed posters became mere fragments of memory, rekindling pain. Within the force, Rachel Donovan's case was seen as a textbook cold case. Initial evidence was thin. A misguided investigative focus squandered early opportunities, and time had buried all leads. Younger officers joining the department only knew her name through dusty case files. The 2015 press conference wasn't about presenting progress, but about keeping the community's memory alive. Klein admitted in a sideline interview, "We have nothing new, but we don't want Rachel to be forgotten." For the community, the news was met with more sighs than expectations. Indianapolis residents were accustomed to missing persons cases, but Rachel's story lingered due to its ordinariness on the night she vanished. Some still recalled the dark sedan, the man in the ATM footage, and the car door slam no one could trace. But after 10 years, those details felt like untouchable shadows floating in collective memory. Rachel's mother, in a brief speech at the press conference, her voice trembling, said, "We just want an answer. Whether my daughter is alive or gone, we deserve to know the truth." Her words silenced the room, but no one could respond. The press conference ended in under 30 minutes. Cameras shut off, and Rachel's photo was taken down. Her file returned to the shelves, sitting beside hundreds of other cases, awaiting a miracle from science or human conscience. That night, Klein returned to his office alone, opening the weathered file with photos of the rain-soaked purse, the dried blood on its strap, and the faint shoe print on the sidewalk. All remained, as they were on day one, only now silent witnesses marked by time. He jotted a line in the latest report. 2015, case revisited. No new leads. It was the coldest affirmation, speaking not just of the present, but of a decade of loss and despair. In 2021, 16 years after the rainy night that claimed Rachel Donovan, the Marion County Sheriff's Office announced the formation of a new cold case unit, dedicated to reviewing files buried in storage for years. Prompted by public pressure and breakthroughs in forensic technology, dozens of unsolved missing persons and murder cases from the past 2 decades were prioritized, and among them, case #2005-1478, Donovan, Rachel, missing person, was flagged once more. At the unit's first meeting, thick case files were laid across a long table. On the covers, faded red numbers and Klein's handwritten notes from 2006 remained. Victim likely deceased. Body not found. Recommendation: preserve evidence, await new technology. For Ethan Morales, a young investigator recently transferred from forensics to the cold case unit, those words were a challenge. Flipping through photos of the purse, the small blood stain on its strap, and the faint shoe print, he recognized them from his academy days, where Rachel Donovan's case was a textbook example of a cold case. Morales vowed, if there was a chance, this would be the first case he'd revive. When compiling a list of evidence to re-examine, Morales prioritized the purse, the only silent witness of the case. In Marion County's storage, it sat untouched in a cardboard box for over 15 years, still sealed, its clear nylon wrapper clouded by time. Morales and a forensic specialist opened it under white lights, documenting every detail. Inside, the small piece of fabric and dried blood sample remained preserved, seemingly useless in 2005, but now potentially a key. The cold case unit sent the blood and fabric to a partner lab specializing in next-generation DNA technology. Unlike 2005, when DNA analysis required large samples and limited databases, 2021 marked the era of genetic genealogy. Even a trace of a few cells could yield a complete DNA profile, and be compared against vast databases of people who voluntarily submitted DNA for ancestry tracing. Morales knew the odds were slim, but the chance to try again after 16 years was unprecedented. In their report to superiors, the cold case unit noted, samples sent for analysis using new technology. Results expected in 8-12 weeks. Goal: identify DNA profile, explore genealogical database tracing. For the first time since 2006, Rachel Donovan's file received a proactive update. When informed, the Donovan family wept. Rachel's mother whispered during a meeting with investigators, "We just want to know where she was, what happened. We've waited nearly 20 years." The unit's atmosphere shifted noticeably. After years of dormant cases, Rachel's file became a focal point, both for its symbolic weight and technological potential. Morales and his team spent hours reviewing old statements, revisiting overlooked witnesses, and cross-checking minute details. They wanted to be ready if the DNA results yielded a name, providing a strong foundation for the next steps. In a personal note, Morales wrote, "We're building a bridge from 2005 to now. That bridge is built on science." That belief breathed new life into Rachel Donovan's case after 16 years in the dark. The lab received the sealed evidence from Marion County in late spring 2021. Inside the box was the purse, untouched for 16 years, carefully wrapped in protective nylon, along with the small fabric piece and swab of dried blood collected in 2005. As they unsealed it under stark white lights in a clean room, the forensic team knew they were touching the past, and any remaining cells could be the only link to the perpetrator. Technicians used specialized tools to gently scrape the dried blood from the strap, placing it into a sterile vial. In 2005, the sample was too small for analysis, but in 2021, new DNA extraction technology could reconstruct an entire genetic sequence from just a few cells. The analysis began with gene amplification via modern PCR systems, followed by sequencing on advanced capillary electrophoresis machines. Millions of tiny data fragments were pieced into a complete genetic profile, nearly the full genome of whoever left the blood. Experienced technicians stared at screens, with loci and STR markers displaying clearly, a far cry from the vague limitations of a decade earlier. After days of continuous work, they had a result, a DNA profile detailed enough to enter into a genealogical database. The next step was uploading the profile to GEDmatch, a massive database where millions of Americans had voluntarily submitted DNA for ancestry or medical research. This was the game changer. Unlike criminal databases, genealogical DNA allowed searches for distant relatives of a suspect. The principle was simple yet powerful. If the suspect wasn't found, find their family. When Rachel Donovan's case data was entered, the software quickly cross-referenced and returned hundreds of potential matches, from 50% DNA matches, parent, child, sibling, to distant 1-2% matches, fourth or fifth cousins. The team's task was to trace back through these scattered matches, building a vast family tree. They meticulously analyzed, ruling out illogical branches, noting where relatives lived and when. After weeks, a large Indiana family stood out, spanning generations with hundreds of members across the state. From this breakthrough, genealogists moved to the most painstaking phase, constructing a detailed family tree down to the smallest branches. Starting with the highest GEDmatch matches, distant cousins and descendants who'd submitted DNA, they traced back to grandparents and great-grandparents before branching down to descendants. Hundreds of names were jotted on paper, connected by sprawling lines across an office wall in the cold case unit. This seemingly dry work was the key. Each branch was cross-checked with public records, birth certificates, marriage licenses, residency registrations, even newspaper obituaries. Couples and generations were marked, eliminating those who didn't fit. A man born in 1940? Too old to be a suspect in 2005. A boy born in 2000? Too young to be involved. Gradually, the list narrowed, discarding dozens, then hundreds of names. After nearly a month of sifting data, the team was left with fewer than 10 men, all from the same family, born between 1960 and 1985, perfectly matching the age range of someone who could have left DNA at the scene in 2005. These faces were circled in red, their profiles printed and pinned to the wall. Investigators dug deeper: who lived or worked near Monument Circle when Rachel vanished, who had a history of violence, minor crimes, or odd behavior. Among them, one name emerged: Daniel Whitaker. Born in 1972, Whitaker had lived in a rented apartment just blocks from Rachel's café. DMV records showed he once owned a dark blue sedan, matching the taxi driver's description of the idling car. Residency data revealed he moved from downtown to a small town in southern Indiana, months after Rachel's disappearance. Furthermore, police records noted he'd been fined for disorderly conduct in a bar and once arrested for stalking a woman, though not charged due to lack of evidence. When the cold case unit received the genealogist report, the meeting room fell silent. After 16 years, they had a suspect identified not just by statements or guesses, but by a chain of scientific evidence. DNA family tree residency records suspicious behavior. Ethan Morales, the young investigator who initiated the reanalysis, stared at Whitaker's blurry photo on the projector screen. An ordinary face, unremarkable, but at the center of the sprawling family tree, a nexus leading straight to him. The memo to superiors concluded: Daniel Whitaker, male born 1972, resided near the scene, owned a vehicle, matching witness description. Behavioral record shows suspicious history. Further investigation needed. This marked the turning point that made Whitaker the focus of Rachel Donovan's case. From a list of hundreds, one name now stood out. For the cold case unit, for the first time in nearly 2 decades, they had a face to place in the primary suspect slot. When Daniel Whitaker was officially named the prime suspect, the cold case unit launched a critical step, reconstructing his timeline from the night Rachel Donovan vanished, April 2005. Records from 2005 showed Whitaker had been briefly interviewed, but as one of dozens questioned, he was quickly dismissed without direct evidence. Now, with DNA and genealogy as a foundation, the team had to scrutinize every detail. Starting with his 2005 statement, Whitaker claimed he was with a friend at an apartment in South Indianapolis on the night of April 23rd. The friend, a coworker from a garage, confirmed meeting Whitaker that evening, but couldn't recall specific times. When pressed about the hours after midnight, Whitaker vaguely said, "We were drinking beer, watching TV, then I went home to sleep." No objective evidence backed this: no cameras, no other witnesses, no receipts. His alibi was shaky, resting solely on a friend's hazy recollection. The cold case unit revisited DMV records and found a detail that piqued their interest. In 2005, Whitaker owned a dark blue Chevrolet Caprice, registered to an address near Monument Circle. This matched the taxi driver Hugh's description: a dark sedan idling in the rain without moving. The coincidence wasn't enough to convict, but it was a suspicious piece when paired with his weak alibi. Investigator Ethan Morales reviewed Whitaker's movements, work habits, frequent haunts. They discovered that during Rachel's disappearance, Whitaker regularly visited the Monument Circle area due to a nearby public parking lot. Surviving parking receipts showed his Caprice appeared multiple times near the café where Rachel worked. This contradicted Whitaker's earlier claim of being someone who rarely went downtown, just worked and went home. When re-interviewed in 2021, Whitaker stuck to his old story. He claimed he spent the entire evening with his friend, going nowhere else. When confronted with evidence of his sedan and parking habits downtown, he grew flustered, repeating, "I don't remember. It's been too long." This ambiguity only deepened suspicion. In an internal report, the cold case unit listed the inconsistencies: weak alibi. The sole witness couldn't recall times, no physical evidence supported it. Vehicle matching witness description: owned a dark blue sedan, consistent with the taxi driver's account. Parking data showed Whitaker's frequent presence near the scene during that period. Investigators concluded When combined with the DNA on Rachel's purse, these details were no longer mere coincidences, but formed a tightening circle of suspicion. Whitaker couldn't prove where he was after midnight, while his vehicle and behavior aligned with the profile of a predator near Rachel's vanishing point. When Morales presented the findings to the team, Klein, now retired but invited back as a consultant, nodded silently. He recalled interviewing Whitaker in 2005, feeling an odd instinct but letting it go for lack of evidence. Now, 16 years later, those vague hunches had crystallized into concrete signs. Whitaker was no longer just a name on a list. He was the first person since Rachel's disappearance to face a robust case of suspicion. As Daniel Whitaker's alibi inconsistencies grew clearer, the cold case unit knew they needed more than DNA and vehicle data to solidify the case. They needed human voices, witnesses who saw, heard, or sensed something off the night. Rachel Donovan vanished. So the 2005 witness list was reopened. Every name in the file, from taxi driver Carl Hughes, Margaret Lewis near the cafe, to Rachel's co-workers, was contacted again, invited to the station, or interviewed at home. 16 years had passed. Memories might have faded, but sometimes time makes people more willing to share what they once hesitated to say. Carl Hughes, the taxi driver, sat in a new interrogation room, facing two investigators with a copy of his old statement neatly on the table. He still vividly recalled that rainy night, the dark sedan idling under streetlights, its engine humming for minutes. "I can't say for sure it was that car," Hughes said cautiously. "But now, hearing he owned a dark blue Chevrolet Caprice, it feels right. Big car, long tail. That's why I remembered it. Nobody sits in a car like that in the rain for no reason." His words weren't much different from 2005, but the reaffirmation, in this new context, strengthened a link. Whitaker's Caprice was a perfect match. Next was Margaret Lewis, who had reported hearing a car door slam around 1:20 a.m. Now, in her 70s, her memory remained vivid. "That noise jolted me awake, and I'm certain it wasn't a house door. It was loud, hollow, exactly like a heavy car door. I remember lying still in bed, heart pounding, afraid something dangerous was happening out there." When investigators showed her a photo of Whitaker's sedan, she shook her head. "I didn't see the car, but the sound, if you ask me, I believe it came from a large vehicle like that." Her statement wasn't direct evidence, but it aligned the suspected car with the noise she heard. A surprise came from a former co-worker of Rachel's, now living in another state, interviewed via video call. While recalling night shifts in 2005, she suddenly mentioned, "Rachel told me a few times about a tall man who kept standing outside the cafe, not coming in for coffee, just smoking and staring inside. She felt uneasy, but thought he might just be a drifter. I remember her saying once, 'He gives me the chills, like he's waiting for me to step out.'" This account made the investigative team pause. They immediately compared it to the 2005 ATM footage, a tall man smoking near the cafe, right as Rachel left. Together, the co-worker's description and the footage revealed a troubling match. As the cold case unit pieced it together, the picture became clearer than ever. The taxi driver saw a dark sedan idling at the scene. Mrs. Lewis heard a loud car door slam at the time. Rachel vanished. The co-worker recalled Rachel's fear of a tall man smoking outside the cafe, matching the figure in the ATM footage. And now, suspect Whitaker owned the exact type of car, lived nearby, and couldn't substantiate his alibi. In an internal report, Morales wrote, "The witnesses, despite 16 years, complement each other and reinforce the image. Rachel was stalked by a tall man, likely Whitaker, and forced into a dark sedan." The independent pieces now form a cohesive narrative. This was something they couldn't achieve in 2005, when each witness was just a fragmented echo. Now, thanks to DNA technology and re-interviews, those echoes converged into a unified story. As the meeting ended, a large board was covered with photos: Rachel, the Caprice, the ATM figure, and witness quotes below. In the center, Daniel Whitaker's name was underlined in red. For the first time in 16 years, Rachel Donovan's case was no longer a haze of theories, but a concrete shape, backed by witnesses, DNA, and a matching vehicle. For the cold case unit, the moment to take a decisive step was near. With the circle of suspicion tightening around Daniel Whitaker through witness statements and his inconsistent alibi, the Marion County Cold Case Unit knew the next move had to be definitive: collect a direct DNA sample from the suspect to compare with the evidence from Rachel Donovan's purse. A covert surveillance warrant was requested and swiftly approved. From then on, Whitaker entered an invisible world he was unaware of, watched 24/7, every move and habit meticulously tracked. 2 unmarked cars took turns tailing him. Sometimes plainclothes officers sat in a bar he frequented. Other times a disguised delivery worker lingered outside the garage where he worked. Every route was logged. Departure times, return times, unusual stops, and unexplainable gaps. The strategy hinged on his daily habits. Whitaker was a longtime smoker and fond of cheap beer after work. Every evening, he sat on his apartment porch, cigarette in hand, feet propped on a chipped railing, a half-empty beer can nearby. Investigators waited patiently, knowing a discarded cigarette or can would be their golden opportunity. It came one Friday night when Whitaker tossed an ashtray full of cigarette butts into a plastic bag, adding a few empty beer cans. As soon as he went inside, an officer posing as a sanitation worker retrieved the bag, sealed it, and sent it straight to the Indiana State Forensic Lab. At the lab, the cigarette butts were carefully dissected, yellowed nicotine fibers soaked in extraction solution. DNA from residual oral epithelial cells was amplified using advanced PCR systems. Simultaneously, the beer cans were swabbed for saliva traces around the rim. Each sample was placed in a separate vial, labeled with time and location. When the genetic sequence appeared on the screen, technicians held their breath. The STR markers were clear, complete, an undeniable DNA profile. The comparison with the blood sample from Rachel Donovan's purse strap, preserved since 2005, showed a perfect match. The probability of another person in the population matching was less than 1 in 1 trillion. The number was near absolute, eliminating all doubt. The lab's report, dozens of pages long, was sent to the cold case unit with a bolded line: "Full match confirmed, DNA evidence conclusive." Reading it, investigator Ethan Morales exhaled, his red-rimmed eyes from months of relentless surveillance finally rewarded. This was no longer suspicion or theory, it was scientific truth. That night, the team held an emergency meeting. On the whiteboard in the command room, Rachel Donovan's photo was pinned at the center, alongside Whitaker's, the dark blue Chevrolet Caprice, and now the DNA report. Every fragmented piece from the past 16 years, the abandoned purse, Hugh's taxi testimony, Mrs. Lewis's car door slam, the ATM figure, the coworker's recollection, converged, with DNA as the red thread tying them into a complete picture. Meanwhile, Whitaker continued his seemingly normal life. He went to the garage, stopped at a bar for cheap drinks, and returned to his rundown apartment, unaware that every step, habit, and discarded cigarette had become evidence against him. The net had closed, and the cold case unit knew they held the sharpest blade to bring Rachel Donovan's case from a forgotten cold case back to the light of justice. In the surveillance phase's final report, Morales wrote, "Daniel Whitaker's DNA is a full match to the crime scene sample. This evidence is decisive." It was the conclusion that the Donovan family and all of Indianapolis had awaited for 16 years. The Marion County Cold Case Unit's meeting room on a Monday morning in September 2021 buzzed with tension. The wall was plastered with yellow sticky notes, a genealogy chart, witness photos, and the thick DNA report fresh from the Indiana State Lab. After months of grueling surveillance, the case had reached its crux. Investigator Ethan Morales, who had persisted from sending the dried blood for analysis to collecting cigarette butts from the suspect's trash, stood before the team, calm but resolute. "We have a case strong enough to charge." He listed the evidence. First, DNA. The 2005 blood on Rachel Donovan's purse strap and Whitaker's DNA from 2021 cigarette butts and beer cans matched perfectly, with a mismatch probability of less than 1 in 1 trillion. Second, timeline. Whitaker claimed he was with a friend that night, but offered no objective proof. The friend only vaguely confirmed meeting without recalling times. Third, vehicle. DMV records confirmed Whitaker owned a dark blue Chevrolet Caprice, matching taxi driver Hughes' description of a dark sedan idling near the café when Rachel clocked out. Fourth, witnesses. Hughes saw the suspicious car. Mrs. Lewis heard a car door slam at 1:20 a.m. Rachel's co-worker recalled her fear of a tall man smoking outside the café, matching the ATM figure. All were compiled into a 200-plus page report. Morales and his team didn't just rely on science, but meticulously connected every statement and detail once thought disparate. In the conclusion, he wrote, "DNA is the cornerstone timeline, and witnesses reinforce. Whitaker's vehicle and suspicious behavior complete the picture." The file was sent to the Marion County Prosecutor's Office. The meeting stretched nearly all day, each piece of evidence dissected, witness reliability weighed, and defense strategies anticipated. The prosecutor, cautious after seeing cold cases collapse, flipped through the pages with unusual focus. At the DNA report, he looked up, eyes heavy but determined. "This is a tight case. DNA is the spine, timeline, and witnesses the muscle. We can take this to a grand jury." The room's atmosphere shifted instantly. Seasoned investigators, frustrated for over a decade, exchanged glowing looks. They knew they could finally give the Donovan family answers. The arrest warrant was drafted that afternoon. The prosecutor signed, the red seal stamping the paper like a sound of release after 16 years. A case once relegated to a cold corner was back on the path to justice. That night, Morales sat alone in his office, the desk lamp illuminating the thick file. On the wall, Rachel Donovan's photo, a young woman with a gentle smile, hung amid papers, watching their every move. Morales opened his notebook, writing a brief but weighty line. "The case is complete. Tomorrow, we bring Daniel Whitaker to light." For him and the team, this wasn't just a job but a promise to a woman who vanished in the rain in 2005. That justice, though slow, would finally arrive. On the night of September 14, 2021, darkness cloaked the quiet suburban area south of Indianapolis, where Daniel Whitaker rented a rundown ground-floor apartment in a low-rise complex. As the clock struck 11 p.m., police cars without flashing lights silently rolled into the neighborhood. A SWAT team was deployed, rifles and shields gleaming under dim yellow streetlights. The arrest warrant, signed by the Marion County prosecutor, was firmly in the lead officer's hand. This was the moment the cold case unit had awaited for 16 years, closing a dark circle that began the night Rachel Donovan vanished. Officers fanned out, surrounding the apartment from 3 sides. Some blocked the alley, stopping all vehicles. Meanwhile, Morales and 2 teammates approached the front door, helmets on, bulletproof vests tight. Rapid knocks echoed, followed by a loud command. "Marion County Police, Daniel Whitaker, open the door now." Inside, a light flicked on, a tense pause. Then the door swung open, revealing a burly middle-aged man, face tanned, eyes wide with shock. "What's this about?" Whitaker asked, voice raspy. A half-empty beer can in hand. Instantly, 2 officers rushed forward, pinning his arms and cuffing them behind his back. Morales read his Miranda rights loudly. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in court." Whitaker struggled, protesting, "I didn't do anything. You've got the wrong guy." But the cold cuffs locked tight, and SWAT swiftly escorted him out. The commotion woke the neighborhood. Lights flicked on, residents peeked from windows, behind curtains. They saw dozens of armed officers, and the familiar burly man led away, head bowed, still shouting. Some neighbors gasped in shock. To them, Whitaker was just the quiet guy who smoked on his porch, never suspected as the center of a 16-year-old case. Within minutes of the arrest, news spread. Local reporters, tipped off by insiders, swarmed the scene with cameras and mics. Flashes lit up as they captured Whitaker being led to a patrol car, shouting, "I'm innocent. You're ruining my life." The images aired live on late-night news, stunning Indianapolis. Police arrest suspect in 2005, Rachel Donovan disappearance, scrolled across screens, making viewers bolt upright. Millions across Indiana were shaken, as Rachel Donovan's name had become a painful memory, thought lost forever. Now, it resurfaced, tied to a handcuffed man in the night. In the patrol car, Morales sat across from Whitaker. He was panting, eyes bloodshot, panic and anger mixed. "You've got nothing on me," Whitaker muttered. Morales stared back, voice cold. "We have your DNA on Rachel Donovan's purse, and we have witnesses." Those words silenced Whitaker, his eyes wavering. For a moment, his bravado turned to fleeting fear. As the car pulled away, neighbors clustered on porches, whispering. Some filmed on phones, posting online. Within hours, #Rachel Donovan trended in Indianapolis. Comments flooded, "They finally got him." "I remember this case from high school, poor girl's family, waiting all these years." For the Donovan family, a midnight call from the police brought tears. Rachel's mother trembled, hearing, "We've arrested a suspect. His name is Daniel Whitaker." 16 years of pent-up emotion burst, not because the pain of loss vanished, but because justice was finally within reach. That night, reporters mobbed the Marion County station. The police spokesperson held an emergency press conference, stating, "We've arrested a suspect directly linked to Rachel Donovan's 2005 disappearance. This is a major breakthrough in a years-long cold case." Camera shutters clicked, and the story hit front pages online within minutes. In the holding cell, Daniel Whitaker sat alone, cuffs off but eyes vacant. He knew this night marked a new chapter, one where his 16-year past could no longer hide. For Indianapolis, it was a milestone. A case thought buried had come alive, and justice was advancing unstoppable. The next morning, in the interrogation room, harsh white neon lit the metal table, creating a stark atmosphere. Daniel Whitaker sat across from two cold case unit investigators, hands clasped tight, face grim, eyes weary yet defiant. The arrest night had drained him, but a spark of resistance lingered. "You've got the wrong guy," he began, voice hoarse. "I didn't touch that girl. I remember 2005, some soldiers from Fort Harrison used to hang around that area. Maybe they did it." He leaned back, arms crossed, as if asserting his innocence. Investigator Ethan Morales silently placed a thick file before Whitaker. He didn't rush to counter, just locked eyes with the suspect, voice calm. "Daniel, we've heard plenty of people blame unknown soldiers in our careers, but one thing doesn't lie." He opened the file, flipped to the forensic results, and slid it forward. "This is your DNA, a perfect match to the blood found on Rachel Donovan's purse." Whitaker raised an eyebrow, giving a faint smirk. "I don't understand those numbers. Maybe your lab screwed up." But his voice wavered slightly. Morales leaned closer, lowering his tone. "You can lie to us, but you can't lie to your own blood. It's been there for 16 years, waiting for science to catch up. And now it points only to you, no one else." The interrogation dragged on slowly. Whitaker kept shifting his story, one moment claiming he was at a friend's, then saying he just passed through the area, even suggesting someone could have picked up my cigarette butt and left it at the scene. Each time, the other investigator patiently tapped a pen, pointing out contradictions, forcing him to face the truth. They presented the parking timeline, Hugh's taxi testimony, Mrs. Lewis's car door slam, the co-worker's account of the tall man smoking outside the café. The pieces formed an undeniable picture. About 4 hours in, Whitaker began to crack. He slouched, hands trembling, rubbing together. Morales delivered the final blow. A thick envelope hit the table, containing photos of Rachel Donovan, from her radiant family portrait to the rain-soaked purse and the crime scene where it was found. Rachel was 27 when she vanished, Morales said slowly. She had a family, a life. For 16 years her mother waited for every call, hoping her daughter would come home. Do you know that feeling, Daniel? Do you have a daughter? The question made Whitaker clench his jaw, eyes welling. A long silence blanketed the room. Then, as if an inner wall crumbled, a heavy sigh escaped. "All right," he muttered. "All right, I'll talk." The room's tension shifted instantly from strained to suppressed. Whitaker looked up, eyes bloodshot. "That night, I'd been drinking more than usual. I saw her leave the cafe, alone. I'd just meant to talk, but things got out of hand." He paused, trembling. "When it was over I panicked. I put her in the car. I didn't know what to do." His voice broke, choking. Morales stared, asking firmly, "Where's Rachel, Daniel? What did you do with her?" The room fell silent for seconds. Then Whitaker confessed, "There's a patch of woods near Eagle Creek Park. I dug a shallow grave, buried her there, near a ditch, under a big oak tree." The confession hit like a hammer, ending 16 years of waiting. The investigators exchanged glances, eyes restrained. They'd just heard the key to unlocking Rachel Donovan's case. Morales nodded slightly, noting every detail, location, landmarks, the tree. Whitaker sat silently, hands gripping the table's edge, his weathered face fully collapsed. No longer the defiant burly man from the arrest night, he was a broken figure, cornered by the truth he'd hidden for nearly 2 decades. And so, after 17 years, the darkness around Rachel Donovan's disappearance cracked open. The location of her body, a confession from the perpetrator, and a chance for justice to finally return. The morning after Daniel Whitaker's confession, a convoy of police cars and forensic specialists quietly left Marion County headquarters, heading north. The destination was pinpointed by his detailed confession, a wooded area along the White River, about 12 miles from downtown Indianapolis. The path to the site was desolate, overgrown with weeds, rarely trodden. Over the years, only a few fishermen and hikers passed through, none suspecting that beneath the decayed earth lay a truth buried for 16 years. Upon arrival, police strung yellow tape across hundreds of meters, sealing the scene. A solemn, heavy air hung over, as all knew they were about to face what the Donovan family had awaited in despair for nearly 2 decades. Investigator Ethan Morales led alongside the forensic team. Before them stood a massive oak tree by a ditch, exactly as Whitaker described. "Under that tree, I buried her." Fallen leaves blanketed the ground, hiding any irregularities, but experts noticed the soil there was slightly sunken, once disturbed. Technicians in white hazmat suits began excavating. Small shovels lifted layers of dirt, then soft brushes cleared clinging dust. Every move was slow, precise, knowing any find could be critical legal evidence. Within an hour, a tattered dark blue fabric emerged. A technician knelt, brushing surrounding soil, recognizing it as part of a pair of jeans. The team shifted to even more careful handwork. Then a small bone appeared, pale under sunlight filtering through leaves. The air froze, everyone holding their breath. "We've found her," Morales whispered. The work continued, revealing more bones, a skull with a long crack, several broken ribs, and a right arm bone with impact fractures. Each find was photographed and sealed per forensic standards. Alongside the remains, personal items surfaced: a rotted denim jacket, intact buttons, fabric scraps from a purse, and notably, a small silver necklace with a heart-shaped pendant. When shown to the Donovan family, Rachel's mother, choking back tears, confirmed, "This was the birthday gift I gave her in 2004. The confirmation cut like a knife, both deepening the pain and proving undeniably that the remains were Rachel Donovan's. All evidence was catalogued, numbered, and placed in preservation boxes. The scene report noted, the skeleton indicated a female, age 25, 30, matching Rachel's profile. Multiple fractures suggested violence, a cracked skull from a heavy blow, broken ribs and arm typical of impact or beating. Preliminary forensics deemed the likely cause of death as traumatic brain injury and multiple injuries from violence. When the news broke, local media erupted. Rachel Donovan's remains found in woods near White River. Outlets called it a pivotal turn in a case that haunted Indianapolis. The city was stunned, and the Donovan family wept. At a press conference, Rachel's mother, voice breaking, said, "We waited 16 years, now we can at least bring her home." For the cold case unit, the excavation not only confirmed Rachel's death, but solidified the case against Whitaker. They now had not just DNA or witness statements, but a body, clothing, jewelry, and signs of violence. Ironclad evidence. Morales, holding the initial forensic report, wrote in his notes, September 17, 2021, "We found Rachel. The truth is no longer buried, but has risen into the light of justice." The Indiana State Forensic Lab took nearly 3 weeks to complete a comprehensive report on the White River findings. When the 150-plus page document reached the cold case unit, investigator Ethan Morales opened each page with tension. The report detailed every bone, fracture, and trace on clothing and jewelry. Skull, a long crack from temple to crown, typical of a heavy blow or direct impact. Ribs, multiple cleanly broken, with fracture lines indicating a strong chest impact. Right arm, longitudinally fractured, likely from defensive shielding or resistance. The report concluded, cause of death, likely traumatic brain injury combined with multiple chest injuries. Mechanism of death, external violence. The clothing found with the remains was also meticulously analyzed. The rotted denim jacket, with broken buttons and a torn sleeve, indicated a struggle. The silver heart-shaped necklace was not only confirmed by the family, but also tested for DNA, revealing traces of Rachel's skin cells, further solidifying identification. Additionally, in the soil around the body, traces of differently colored fabric were found, possibly from the perpetrator's clothing. Forensic comparison of this fabric with an old jacket of Whitaker's, seized from evidence storage in 2006, showed a match. The report directly tied to Whitaker's confession in the interrogation room. He had claimed he only meant to talk, but things got out of hand. Forensic experts noted that Rachel's arm fractures were consistent with defensive actions, indicating she was attacked head-on. The skull injury aligned with the scenario of the perpetrator striking her head to subdue her. The torn fabric matched a violent struggle. All these details showed that Whitaker's vague confession aligned with forensic evidence, but also exposed the extent of violence and intent in the attack. In a closed meeting, prosecutors reviewed each section. "We have direct DNA, corroborating witnesses, an indirect confession, and now comprehensive forensics," one prosecutor said. "This is a case the jury cannot dismiss." Morales added, "Whitaker may argue he didn't intend to kill Rachel, but with the skull and rib injuries, the act was intentional infliction of serious harm, leading to death. We can charge first-degree murder." The forensic report also confirmed the time of death, aligned with the 1:15 to 1:45 a.m. window on April 23, 2005, matching all witness accounts. Taxi driver Hughes saw the dark sedan idling at 1 o'clock. Mrs. Lewis heard the car door slam at 1:20. The ATM camera captured the tall man smoking at 1:05. Now forensic data proved Rachel died in that exact time frame. The scattered pieces from 16 years ago formed a complete picture with no gaps left. In the summary, sent to the Marion County prosecutor, Morales wrote, "Forensics confirmed the remains as Rachel Donovan and identified the mechanism of death as violent. DNA evidence, witnesses, and timeline align. Whitaker's confession is validated by fractures and signs of a struggle. We have an undeniable case ready for court." That day, the large board in the cold case unit's room was updated. Below Rachel's photo, the words "missing person" were gone. Instead, red text read, "Homicide victim, case ready for trial." After 16 years, the truth was clear, and Rachel Donovan's case was no longer a mystery, but a rock-solid indictment, ready to bring the perpetrator to justice. In March 2022, the Marion County Courthouse opened the long-awaited trial, State of Indiana, Vir, Daniel Whitaker. The courtroom was packed, with press, Indianapolis residents, and the Donovan family sitting silently in the front row, hands clasped tightly. The air was thick with anticipation. The prosecutor began, "Your Honor, this is not just a criminal case, it's a 17-year journey for justice for Rachel Donovan. Today, we will show an undeniable chain of evidence." He detailed the night of April 2005, the camera capturing Rachel leaving the café, the dark sedan parked nearby, and the discovery of her purse with blood. He emphasized, for 16 years, this case was cold, but next-generation DNA technology named the killer, and that is Daniel Whitaker. The defense countered aggressively. They argued that the prosecution relied on genetic genealogy, a method, they claimed, not fully vetted by traditional law. The defense attorney told the jury, "You'll hear about GEDAB, match family trees. But remember, this isn't an official criminal database. These are DNA samples people voluntarily uploaded online. You must ask, is it legal to use this to convict a man of murder?" They also alleged the confession was coerced. "My client was isolated for hours, pressured, and forced to admit things he didn't do." The prosecution struck back with objective evidence. They called a DNA expert to the stand, who explained, the blood on Rachel's purse strap, preserved since 2005, couldn't be analyzed then. But in 2021, we sequenced a full profile. We compared it to DNA from Whitaker's cigarette butts and beer cans, collected under strict forensic protocols. The result was a perfect match. This isn't just genealogical DNA, it's a direct crime scene to suspect comparison. The phrase "perfect match" stirred murmurs in the courtroom. The defense objected, "There's no direct evidence Whitaker interacted with Rachel. DNA could have been contaminated, picked up from the environment." The prosecution called another witness, the forensic pathologist who excavated the remains. She detailed the bone fractures, skull trauma, and stated, "These injuries aren't accidental. They result from deliberate violence." She pointed out the arm fracture matched Whitaker's claim of Rachel fighting back. The prosecution continued with living witnesses, taxi driver Carl Hughes. He recounted the dark sedan idling in the rain, headlights on but stationary. When asked, "Can you confirm it resembled the dark blue Caprice Whitaker owned?" Hughes replied firmly, "Exactly like it. I remember that car's shape." Next, Mrs. Lewis confirmed the loud car door slam at 1:20 a.m., aligning with Rachel's disappearance. Finally, Rachel's former coworker testified about her complaints of a tall man smoking outside the cafe, matching the ATM figure. The defense tried to shake the jury's confidence, repeating that the confession isn't reliable. Police pressured him, and this could be a scientific mistake. But the prosecution kept returning to the DNA. They displayed a large screen chart, dozens of loci perfectly matching between the blood and Whitaker's sample. "The chance of a random person matching is less than 1 in 1 trillion, the expert stressed. In other words, in the entire global population, only Daniel Whitaker matches the blood on Rachel Donovan's purse." In closing arguments, the prosecutor approached the jury, voice resounding, "For 17 years, the Donovan family lived in darkness, waiting for answers. Today we have it all: DNA, witnesses, forensics, and the defendant's own confession. There's no doubt left. Daniel Whitaker killed Rachel Donovan." The defense responded weakly, clinging to reasonable doubt, but many jurors' eyes had hardened. As the judge called a recess for jury deliberation, the courtroom fell silent. The Donovan family gripped each other's hands. Morales, in the investigator's row, bowed his head and exhaled. He knew they'd laid everything before the court. Now the verdict rested with 12 ordinary citizens. But whatever the outcome, Rachel Donovan's case was no longer a mystery, but a testament to the power of science, persistence, and faith that justice, though slow, would speak. After 2 days of closed deliberation, on a late March afternoon in 2022, the Marion County Courthouse jury returned. The air was thick, all eyes fixed on the heavy wooden door as the 12 jurors entered, faces stern. The judge asked everyone to rise, then posed the pivotal question, "Have you reached a verdict?" The jury foreman nodded, holding a folded paper. He read aloud, voice clear, "We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Whitaker guilty of kidnapping Rachel Donovan. We, the jury, find the defendant Daniel Whitaker guilty of murdering Rachel Donovan." The word guilty echoed, prompting sobs from the Donovan family. Rachel's mother covered her face, tears streaming, while Morales, in the investigator's row, clenched his fists, exhaling a 17-year burden. Whitaker, standing in the dock, stared downward. Throughout the trial, he'd maintained a defiant edge, but at the verdict, his body seemed to collapse. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder, but no words remained for defense. The verdict closed all doors. The judge looked directly at Whitaker when sentencing. Based on the jury's verdict, the defendant Daniel Whitaker is sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. This is the harshest penalty Indiana law allows in this case. The defendant took the life of a young woman, causing her family and community pain for nearly 2 decades. Justice, though late, has arrived today. The gavel struck, ending the trial. News outlets instantly reported Daniel Whitaker, perpetrator in the 2005 Rachel Donovan case, sentenced to life without parole. Evening broadcasts opened with courtroom images and the echoing "guilty." Indianapolis reacted strongly. Many residents shared online that they felt justice had returned after years of burial. The hashtag #Justice for Rachel spread, with thousands of comments honoring the young woman lost in that rainy night. The Donovan family, in a post-trial press conference, spoke through tears. "We waited 17 years to hear guilty. Rachel can't come back, but her soul can rest. We know justice has been served." They thanked the Cold Case Unit, the community for remembering Rachel, and especially DNA technology for giving a voice to the departed. For the Cold Case Unit, it was a bittersweet victory. Morales wrote in the final report, March 29, 2022. Daniel Whitaker, sentenced to life without parole. The Rachel Donovan case is officially closed. Justice came late, but it came. That line, placed beside Rachel's photo in the office, was a final farewell to a nearly 2-decade investigation. After Daniel Whitaker's life sentence without parole, the Rachel Donovan case became more than a closed criminal file. It became a landmark case study in Indiana's judicial history. Police academies and forensic programs included it in curricula, highlighting the importance of genealogical DNA. From a tiny dried blood stain on a purse strap, once deemed useless, experts built a family tree, identified a suspect, and used science and witnesses to reconstruct the full picture. It was vivid proof that evidence never loses value if technology advances to hear its voice. Post-trial, the Marion County Sheriff's Office held a press conference, announcing plans to widely apply genealogical DNA to dozens of lingering cold cases. The lesson from Rachel Donovan, Lieutenant Ethan Morales stated, is that no case is truly over until justice is served. If we preserve evidence carefully, tomorrow's science will provide answers. The message, broadcast statewide, renewed hope for other families awaiting news from long unsolved disappearances. Indianapolis, once skeptical after years of dead ends, saw a new path. Residents discussed how DNA broke the silence, proving no one could hide in the dark forever. Rachel's case didn't just deliver justice for one family, it restored collective faith that truth, though buried, could be unearthed like remains under that oak. The Donovan family, after the final verdict, held a memorial for Rachel, placing a small headstone by the White River where her body was found. Her mother, at the ceremony, said, "Justice may come late, but it never vanishes. My daughter waited 17 years for justice's voice, and now she can rest." The quote became a widely cited capstone to the case. In legal circles, the Whitaker case sparked debates about the legality and limits of genealogical DNA and the use of voluntary databases in investigations. But ultimately, the guilty verdict and life sentence affirmed that when used correctly, it's a legitimate and powerful tool. Looking back, the nearly two-decade journey of Rachel Donovan's case was more than an investigation. It was proof that persistence, science, and justice can converge. A case thought dormant became a wake-up call. No perpetrator can hide forever, for justice always finds a way. The Rachel Donovan case offers a timely lesson for America today. Justice may be delayed, but with community, family, and legal system persistence, truth will emerge. Rachel vanished in 2005 when DNA technology was too limited to take police to the end. For years, the case grew cold, and the family nearly lost hope. But the careful preservation of one detail, the blood on the purse strap, became the key when genealogical DNA emerged. Today, as America faces thousands of unsolved cases, this story reminds us that investing in forensic science and evidence preservation is vital, not just for past justice, but for society's current trust. Another sobering detail: for years, police chased the wrong lead, focusing on the hookah lounge, an immigrant group without solid evidence, wasting resources and eroding community trust. This warns that bias or hasty assumptions can derail justice. In today's America, where minority communities still fear prejudice, Rachel's case is a reminder that investigations must rely on scientific evidence, not gut feelings. Finally, when the court declared Daniel Whitaker guilty with a life sentence, Indianapolis understood that truth could be buried for 17 years, yet still rise to light. The lesson for us all is to trust persistence, support science, and above all, never let unsolved cases fade into oblivion. Each is a family awaiting justice's knock. Thank you for following Rachel Donovan's 17-year journey to justice, a story showing truth never fades. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to explore more cold case stories with us. See you in the next video.